So messaging in Chromium/Google Chrome extensions. So there are several ways to communicate within an extension. We'll show the easiest one first. So as you can see, as a reminder, we have this very basic extension here. I've already integrated this in the browser. And as you can see, it's just, we are listening to this tabs on updated event. If the tab URL is kind of HTTP and the status changed to complete, then we're just injecting our foreground script, our content script, foreground file, our foreground. And this foreground is now console logging this line here. And as you can see, this works. So this is the very basic start. And right now we don't need those console log anymore. We will just remove that. And actually, in this particular case, we'll start with the communication on the service worker side. You could also start on the foreground side. That's no problem. I'll just show this one first, and after that, the other way around. So here we'll just use the Chrome tabs object because the problem or the challenge here is that which is the tab? There could be many tabs open. Maybe in many of these tabs, we also have this foreground injected. So to whom of these do we actually want to send a message to? So we need to use Chrome tabs, send message here. And the first thing we need to specify actually is the tab ID. Okay, so this way we are specifying this is the tab we want to send the response to. And in this tab, we have before that successfully injected our foreground script. So now we're just specifying a message, could be named differently, hi foreground, and maybe we also want to send some payload. Let's say we have the URL of the tab already accessible here, so we also send some payload maybe. Could also be structured differently, right? And if we now save this, and now we need to reload the extension, we can open the console for the service worker. The console for the foreground is open here, and if we now reload this, then we get this error message. So this error message tells us the receiving end does not exist, which is not really a well-formed error message because technically our foreground exists, but in the foreground there's nothing dealing with the actual message. So how are we going to do that? Well, luckily on the foreground side, things are much easier as we do not have to specify to which of the service worker we want to listen to. Okay, so we're just using Chrome runtime, and then it's clear that we want to listen to the service worker basically. And here is a on-message event that we want to utilize, and there we can bind an event listener to. So we add a listener to this event, and this provides us a few capabilities. So we'll get the actual request that was sent as a message. We'll get information about the sender, so who sent this, not very useful in this particular case, and we have the capability to send a response. Okay, as you can see, that's a pretty easy interface. We'll just console log the request. So we could also, let's say, do this console log. We have, as part of the message, we know this, there is an object that's called payload, and we can this way directly access, of course, the value of this particular key. Okay, pretty easy. Let's say just we can clear this one and now reload this thing. This is okay, I misspelled this, and so now it perfectly works. Okay, so this is the way you are sending an easy message from the background, from the service worker to a content script. Same works the other way around. So you could actually say you want to send a message from the foreground to the service worker. There we again use Chrome runtime. And then we have the function called send message, and there we are just maybe sending hi background as kind of a response to hi foreground. We're now sending hi background. Okay. If we are going to perform this, we can also, if you think we might have the need to reinitiate the extension itself, we can try this again. Seems to be not working, and there's also no error message. So as you remember, we had this error message before when we tried to send this message here to the foreground, that there was the complaint, well, the receiving end does not exist. This is not the case when you try to send messages the other way around. Then you won't get an error message that the background actually is not dealing with the error. So yeah, this particular behavior in this case is not really consistent. And it works actually absolutely the same. So you have the Chrome runtime on message event, and you can add a listener to this. You have the same signature, request, sender, and you could send a response. And here we could just console log the request. And now we would need to reload the extension, reload the page. Now you can see hi background is being console logged out here. Okay, so this is the way this works. So you not really are getting the same error messages consistently throughout the extension development, but the kind of the way you are dealing with messages in this easy way is pretty much the same. Of course, this is not really, let's say, the best possible way to deal with a response. We could do this, of course. We could maybe utilize the send response thing much cleaner. So I'll show you something. Let's comment this out quite quickly. We need to create, I will now create a function. Let's say a function my logger. This thing gets some data, and this will then console log the data for us. Okay. And here I will just call my logger, will pass the request, maybe in this particular case even just the request.payload, which in this case will be our URL. And after that I could just call send then, and then use the send response callback. Okay. The only thing I need to do to make this work is to add return true after that, because otherwise this won't work. Of course, the send response should actually have some content. Let's say message hi background as a response to our hi foreground. And then you might think that this works, right? So it does not work because of two reasons. Let's start with the first reason. As this now is a response to this message here, we actually need to implement the possibility that there will be a response in the service worker as well. So we need to deal with this response, and then we can just console log the response. Okay. So I just saw this during the video editing. Instead of just changing the signature here, we could actually just use a variable declaration. So we'll give a const, let's call it response, and use this the response this way. So this way we could also console log our response message here. And if I reload the extension this way, let's get rid of that. Then you see also, then you can also see that our response message, which is in this case simple messaging hi background, is it's this one here. is actually also being treated correctly. So you can just declare a variable which then automatically gets assigned the return value. So here, the send message now actually expects a response, and this response now can be dealt with. In this case here, this should work, but it actually won't work. Let's demo this, that it actually does not work. So let's get rid of that and reload the extension. We'll do this, and we get an error message. So last error, the message port closed before a response was received. And here is cannot read properties of undefined reading then. So why is that? It's pretty simple. The Chrome runtime actually in its whole context runs in an asynchronous way. The moment we are leaving this asynchronous path will cause us trouble. So we have to make sure that this mylogger function also is declared as async. And by just reloading the extension now, we can get rid of these errors here as well, as we already know it. Clear this, reload that, now it works. So make sure that when you are using this way, this callback, that you are not leaving the async path by calling, for example, a non-async function. So this is the easy way to deal with responses. I can also, let's say, uncomment this one to also demonstrate the following. Let's again clear this. No, sorry, reload here. Reload that particular page. And as you can see here now, two things happen. I will move this over here. So hi background 2 is the message. Let's say, let's do it this way. No, sorry, get rid of that, this way. So hi background 2 is from line 30. This is this one here. And this is the message we are sending down here, okay? Sorry. And the hi background is the response that we are logging in line 18 in the background. So as you can see, sending hi background is something that the response capability of the send message interface will be dealing with. And if we would just, you know, if we wouldn't have this, then it actually will not work. Okay, we can just simply close this. Just for demonstration purposes, reload it. And as you can see now, maybe to make it clearer, only the hi background message, that's the one down here, is being retrieved by the onMessage interface, because the send response is not treated as a message. It is the response to the send message that was initiated on the other side. So always make sure that you know, okay, this is what you're talking about. Is it a new message, or is it a response to a message that was initiated on the other side of the extension? So let's talk about the second way of dealing with things. The second way actually works entirely different. I will just remove this. I will also remove that, and I will remove this as well. So we start pretty much from scratch. There's no code, no messaging, nothing. And what you actually can do, and maybe we start this on the foreground this time, is you can utilize something that is called long-living connections. They're not actually lasting that long. You will see that quite soon. But actually, they are meant to be, you know, messaging ports that you can recycle more often or for a longer time. And maybe this approach is more appealing to your use case. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a port as a constant, as a const. And here we'll just use chrome.runtime.connect. Chrome runtime connect actually allows us to specify a port. And the only thing we need to provide actually is a is a name. So I will call this, okay, my port name, okay? And yeah, so this way we have now a port defined. So now I can use this port to actually post a message. So I will port post message, and yeah, and it's a pretty easy object. Message, let's say message hi background. Okay. So we're now sending this message to a port that we've created here. So we are saying, please connect this foreground file, this foreground, to our service worker using a port which we have named my port name. And now we are using this port to actually post a message, and this message has this object here, message hi background. Okay. Now the question is, of course, how can we receive that message on the background? Because yeah, we can try this, but it actually will not work. So I will just reload the extension, and okay, now we get on the foreground log, we get the error, could not establish connection, receiving end does not exist. Okay, at least we get an error message. So now we can actually define the listening, the receiving end on connect is the event. So Chrome runtime on connect. We will add a listener to this, and this actually will utilize a port. Okay, here as well. And now we can pretty easily just console log the port. Okay, so now we should have we should be able to get rid of that particular message. Let's reload this, and as you can see, the error message is gone. We also have a disconnect event here, and this is this pretty much the state of our port. Okay, so we could expand this, and yeah, and when we click on name, it's actually the my port name which we have here. So here is the message. Here is the port, and now we have a listener bound to the port that we've created on the foreground. So that's pretty neat. The next thing is, of course, we want to do something with the message, right? We can actually console say function dot is so as we now have made sure that the port actually works, we can now just access events to that port. So as you have seen on the in the console log, there is this on message, and the question is now, okay, how can we listen to messages? We of course again will just bind a listener to that, and here we can just function, let's say message, and here we can console log message. Okay, so now we should be able to have this whole thing be working. And as you can see, now we have this hi background message. Okay, so this way we have now used a port, which is this supposed to be a longer living connection. We have given it a name. That's all we need to do. We just need to provide a name for that. And now actually what happens in the background in the Chromium process is that it will reserve a kind of a frame, and this frame is being recycled along the messaging posts from either side. So technically it's meant to be an interface for a longer living connection, and you could utilize it this way. You could of course also do it the other way around, so you could start on the background, providing defining a port and then send a message, and of course this would also work. The thing here now is that, of course, we could also utilize, let's say, if message message. Okay, in this case, it's not that nicely defined. Let's say if it is high background. So now we're checking if the message is high background. Then we are just, if this is true, then we're just utilizing port post message to provide an object. Let's say message high foreground. Okay. So now, of course, we need the same thing on the other side. So we don't have an on message event listener here. Add listener, and now we just need to let's say, yeah, function message. And in this case, we can just console log message. Okay, so this should work. Let's see if we can make this work. High background, high foreground. So as you can see, this actually works. We have the message sent back, and this way the high foreground message, and this now is being used here. So this way we can actually, you know, send messages utilizing this port interface. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is, as with generally every capability the service worker has, is the lifespan of the service worker itself. This will be a maximum of 5 minutes. And after those 5 minutes, the service worker context is gone, and you will not be able to use this messaging interface no matter what. So, and it's actually really a pity that this is the case. There's no, let's say, official workaround for this. The only thing you can do, and this is what most people are doing, is actually to make sure that the service worker never dies. And how do you do that? That's a nasty trick, and I'll show you right now. Okay, so the nasty service worker trick. Basically, what's the problem again? The problem is that the Chromium team removed the option to define the service worker to live forever from manifest version 2 to manifest version 3. So you can no longer use this. The maximum service worker lifespan is now about 5 minutes. So the only thing you need to you can do actually currently is to make sure that you are constantly using the messaging interface between the service worker and the front ends, and this has to start on the front end actually to work properly. So it's a nasty trick. I will explain that in a second. So we'll use this. I'll create a function which I will call ping, and I will then say, I will just send a message, Chrome runtime dot send message, and we will give it an easy to identify name. So in this case, it will be ping, and pretty much that's it. The special thing is that we'll, in the case of a response, we'll actually call the function itself using a timeout handler, and this timeout handler will then take our function ping as a parameter, and let's say every 2000 milliseconds, which will be every 2 seconds. That's, of course, that's too much, but you should not let's say pick the number too high. So maybe every 10 seconds is okay, every 15 seconds might be okay as well. Yeah, but this is, it's pretty much what you can do. And here you will just call ping. Okay, so you'll create this function, call this function, make sure that everything else in your logic, what your extension really does, is supposed to do, that all of that has happened. And after you've done that, you're actually then, as pretty much the last step of your code, you'll be start to send such a ping message. Okay, so this ping message. So and of course here on the background side, you need to implement the response for this. So first of all, you're going to target only to do this for this particular message. So if the message actually is ping, then we want to send a response, and in this response maybe we'll provide some payload. Yeah, let's call this also message, and then provide a new date or something. So this pretty much should do the trick. So this way we are constantly sending messages back and forth. Let's just reload this extension, get rid of this, reload the tab, and then let's see if this works. Okay, we have not we have no logging in this particular case, so we could, let's say, integrate just a log here, console log response dot message, which in our case should be that new date. And as you can see, we are getting constantly new date strings at the console log. Of course, I would not necessarily console log those, but yeah, and it's also a good practice. I haven't researched this in depth, but it's a good practice to actually have a changing value in there, so that you are actually transporting something that cannot be cached beforehand. So this way you now have an endless communication. In fact, you could even in energy save mode and wake it up again, and the communication would still work. It's crazy how good this works. On the other hand, of course, it is bypassing the root cause why this thing actually exists. So the Chromium team, I guess, has found out that if you have quite a few extensions up and running, if you have quite many tabs open, that might be the case that all those infinite service workers that you could have had with Manifest version 2, that those service workers are actually consuming a lot of resources, and that this slows down the device performance, or maybe it's increasing your energy consumption. Could be many reasons why the Chromium team said, okay, let's remove this option. On the other hand, there's quite a massive Bugtracker item on this, which I can briefly show you. So it's this one right here. So here you can see there's quite a few responses to this. And unfortunately, the Chromium team still did not respond with a proper solution. So they have a solution. They have not really a solution, but yeah, this is the situation right now. So if you need a really long-running communication, a really long-running service worker, the only way right now is to implement a nasty hack like this. I would strongly recommend to not console log the output of that, because this will make other people crazy. So this way it's kind of okay, but it's actually not really a nice workaround. I have a hard feeling to recommend you guys something like this. Of course, when using the long-lived connections, you can also implement something like this this way. Let's get rid of this one. I'll just quickly just show you this. Maybe we'll also comment that out and define some, let's say, some port. Okay, and we'll now create a function. Yeah, could also be maybe even better. Do it async. Let's stay connected. Let's do this. And here we could just say, okay, some port equals Chrome runtime dot connect, and let's sorry for that. Let's give it a name. My port, my endless port. Okay, so here we have a pretty easily identified some port, and now you could actually use the on disconnect event. So there is this on disconnect add listener, and here we could just identify using this on disconnect event. We could actually call the let's stay connected function. So in the case this port gets disconnected, we are calling this function to actually, to create a new connection. The old connection is then gone, but the service worker is constantly being reused actually. And so we, in this case we could also prolong the lifetime. The only thing we need to make sure is that ultimately, also in this case, we need to call the let's stay connected. Okay, so also in this, so that's, of course, that wouldn't work. So in this case, we can also use the ports or the runtime.connect interface to create a pretty much endless connection. Okay, there are two more topics on the extension side, so those I will be just explaining with the documentation. I think those use cases are pretty rare, and so I haven't seen the point in demoing these. So the first is cross-extension messaging, so you could actually provide a port that other Chromium extensions could then interface with your extension. If this is something you could see, like if you're providing a binary data topic or something that might be useful also for other extensions. If this is something you would do, then maybe this is a good solution. It's not really so easy to maintain. So let's start with, there are actually separate interfaces for that. So on message external and on connect external, there are examples here in the documentation. You'll find the link down in the description. But it's actually, the core problem is this one. So you need to know, as an extension that is initiating the communication, you need to know the ID of the extension that you want to talk to. And it might not be that easy to maintain. Of course, those IDs could also be fetched using a web service that you might also have under your control or that you can influence, because these numbers over time definitely need to be maintained. So those IDs are not as static as you would like. Also something that's another use case is you could actually also interact with web pages to extensions. There are ways to determine which extensions are installed and have access to the site. So you as a web page owner, you could actually determine if there is an extension that you have a use case for that you want to talk to. But I think this case is actually more valid for, let's say, intranet use cases where you want to provide a group of people special features on a site. Here is, for example, there is kind of a special editor maybe version that is provided here. Of course, in your extension you can also reduce the scope for this capability to restrict this to pages that you wanted to work on. So that you want to open the communication, this external communication for. But generally speaking, there you have the same problem again. The problem is that you have the extension ID and that somehow needs to be dynamic, can't be really that static as you would like to have it. Down in the description, you find the link to the GitHub repository, so you can download the code. As I said, you also find the link to this Chromium Bugtracker, where you could also read the statements from the Chromium team, why they did it this way, and maybe other hints on how to actually fit your use case. If you have any feedback for me, what can I improve? Are those videos too long, too short? Do you want to know more details? Please provide it in the comments. I'm very happy to respond to your feedback. Thanks a lot.